Welcome back to another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. I am your host, Omar Zaran. And this week, I want to talk a little bit about dynasties. If you were watching the NFL this past weekend, you saw, or likely saw, like many Americans did, the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Buffalo Bills. So, it's an interesting matchup, right? Because these teams have kind of seemed to be on a trajectory to meet each other throughout the regular season and into the playoffs over the past few years. Really, ever since Brady left New England, you have had the emergence of Mahomes and the subsequent emergence of Josh Allen with the Bills. And in many ways, it's kind of turned into a Brady Manning type situation that we had in the early 2000s. In this case, Mahomes being the Brady and Allen being the Manning. You know, Mahomes is the one with the rings. Mahomes is the one who's had more success. Allen is kind of the uber talented physical freak of nature that you could kind of make a correlation that Manning was, right? But for many, the perception has been that Kansas City has owned this matchup, and in the playoffs they have. But Buffalo has won a few games in the regular season. And heading into this matchup, KC was the only undefeated team left, 9-0. Buffalo was a 7-2, and has their division in firm grasp. So as the game goes on, KC can't make enough plays. Josh Allen too much, and Kansas City loses this game by 9 points. And what really got me interested about this game, obviously it's a big matchup, it's a potential AFC Championship preview, but what really got me interested is the general reaction of people not living in Missouri and people not living in Buffalo. So I feel like there's been this thing where as the Chiefs have had more and more success, they have kind of become the team that everybody wants to lose. And I was watching a TikTok video by a really good sports creator. Her name is Tanya Fox, and she's based out of the New England area, so she's been a Patriots fan forever. And now she was talking about how good it is to be able to hate the dominant team, to be able to hate the Chiefs because they just keep on winning. And it really got me to thinking about how we view dynasties, because on one hand, we hate to see them win, but historically, we love to see them win, right? Because they create captivating stories and interesting storylines. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and I kind of want to delve into the Chiefs dynasty in specifics as a kind of illustration of this kind of psychological condition that we have when it comes to the way we view dynasties. So kind of starting off with why people hate the Chiefs. The simple answer is that they win, right? When a team is winning, you're going to hate them because you're tired of seeing your team lose. And I think about dynasties we've had recently. You could go with the Patriots dynasty in the NFL. You could go with the Yankees in the 90s, the Bulls in the 90s in the NBA, the Golden State Warriors in the mid-2000s when Kevin Durant was there. These are all 49ers in the NFL back in the day. There's a lot to go from. And generally, we operate in a dynasty parallel universe, right? Now, we're starting to see that maybe fade away in the NBA as new champions are crowned every single year since 2020, it seems like. And MLB, we've kind of gone away from it a little bit, but you think maybe the Dodgers have something there. NHL hasn't had a dynasty since they had the lockout and implemented their new salary cap rules. You still have dynasties in international soccer, obviously like Manchester City, Liverpool with the way they win, Juventus in the Italian league, PSG in the French league, Bayern Munich in the German league. But here in America, we've had dynasties all around us. And even though we kind of hear about parity this, parity that, in the NFL it's very much a real thing. The Chiefs, for the longest time, didn't lose a game. They had 15 games in a row that they had won, dating back to last year and the playoffs. And so the easy way to really hate them is by saying like, yeah, I'm tired of them winning. If you're a Chargers fan or a Patriots fan or really a fan of any team that's in the AFC, you're going to hate the Chiefs because they keep on winning Super Bowls. They've won 2 in a row, and they're looking for the third this year. And there's a very good chance that they get it. But when we look at like what is there to hate, right? Because in other dynasties, there have been a reason to hate them. For people hated the Golden State Warriors because they thought that they ruined NBA free agency by signing Kevin Durant. Ruined the balance of power. It just wasn't fair. The scales were tipped. That whole thing. People hated the Patriots because the perception was that they were cheaters, right? People hated the Lakers in the 2000s because Shaq felt like a cheat code, and they happened to have the best coach in the league at the time in Phil Jackson, so dynasties like that, there's like a focal point that just makes things feel unfair. With the Chiefs, at least this year, they don't really have that, right? Like, you could say, well, they have Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes this year has not looked great. Like statistically, his numbers are down. He's thrown for under 200 yards multiple times in games. And he's not like this put the numbers up guy that he has been in the past. And that's because he's just gotten a little bit, figuring out what it takes to win the game type of thing. And that's just been the thing. And like nobody really hates Andy Reid. He's probably one of the most relatable and likable coaches that we have in the NFL. He's very humble, and even with all the success, he's just Coach Reid, right? That's just kind of who he is. It's not like Belichick, where he was kind of off to the side, kind of perched from the roof kind of a type of thing. Andy Reid, by contrast, feels incredibly accessible. Travis Kelce has one of the most popular podcasts on the internet with his brother Jason. And his approval rating is always sky high. I guess the one thing that you can say some people hate about the Chiefs is the Taylor Swift element, right? And obviously Travis dating pop megastar Taylor Swift. A lot of people have certain feelings about Taylor Swift, and that usually echoes their political ideologies or the concept of not wanting to see significant others pan to during a game, right? And that's a reason to hate the Chiefs. All right, cool. But ultimately, like, the hatred quotient is incredibly low for this team. They have young guys on defense. No one's a real asshole. They just perform really well. Chris Jones is likable. You could say maybe Rashee Rice with his issues with the law and all that. Okay, maybe. But you're really kind of struggling because the Chiefs, what they have done, almost all their important guys have been acquired via the draft and development. Mahomes drafted, Kelce drafted, Isaiah Pacheco drafted. When they had Tyreek Hill, they drafted him. They drafted Rashee Rice. They drafted Xavier Worthy. They drafted Chris Jones. They get all the guys on defense. They draft. And a lot of times they'll have a guy who's really good on defense, and come time to pay him, they'll let him go and replace him with another guy. So they have a very strong development system, as opposed to being like a team like the New York Jets, right, who are just trying to trade for players and sign free agents all the time. So you can't really hate that because that's what people are supposed to say that they like. A lot of people say they hate when people assemble super teams or whatever. The Chiefs are a team that have built it organically, by and large. Yes, they have acquired or taken flyers on a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster a couple years ago or DeAndre Hopkins this year. But by and large, it's just the same cast of characters that they've always had, and they keep on developing, keep on drafting. Brett Veach does a great job. The scouting team does a great job. But we still find a way to hate them and want them to lose every game. Because why? Because we hate dynasties, and we are tired of them always winning. We want to see somebody new win, right? That's kind of the overarching theme that a lot of fans have. So, like, they'll be in a situation here where you hate the dynasty because it's boring. Like coming from a tech world, right? A lot of people who use Android phones, they say Yeah, I got my Pixel or I got my Galaxy because I was just tired of the iPhone. It got too boring. And that's what Dynasty is. Dynasties are the iPhone, right? You know what it is. They do the same thing every single time. They always win somehow, some way, and then you're over it. And it's especially jarring, I think, in the NFL because every single mechanism in the NFL is designed for a new team to win every year. Really, think about it. It's single game elimination in the playoffs. So you have one bad game, you're done, right? That's not the case in baseball or basketball or hockey, right? All those sports present a series. Think about the NCAA basketball tournament. What makes it so exciting is that an upset can happen whenever, right? Then you look into the fact that football has a little bit more of a hard cap than the NBA does, which means that you can't retain the same players into perpetuity like teams in the 60s and 70s did, right? Then you look at the scheduling. When you win your division, you get what's called a, quote, first place schedule the following year, meaning it's a harder schedule. It's designed for you not to continue winning your division. Every single thing is put in place for this parity. And in a sense, it exists on the bottom level or the mid level, which is if you are a bad team, you're going to get a favorable schedule. And when you get that favorable schedule, you are then going to have a good chance to make the playoffs. So really often you'll see a team that finished last in their division or a distant third in their division end up with a really good season. We're seeing it with the Washington Commanders. They've been a joke for a number of years, but now they get the QB, they get a favorable schedule. Now they've won 7 games, right? They're probably not as good as their record indicates, but that's the idea, is that you give a team an opportunity to get better immediately. Now, at the top end, it really hasn't been that way. You really think about it. Like, in the 90s, you had, like, Brett Favre and John Elway kind of dominating. And then that led right into the Brady era, which, you had sprinkled in there the Peyton Manning Super Bowls, Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl. And then now you've transitioned that into the Patrick Mahomes era, right? And so it's like, even with how designed on parity this league is, the Chiefs and other dynasties before them have found a way to just win. And we hate that, right? Because it's supposed to be the other way around. It's not supposed to be Kansas City every year. It's supposed to be that the Chargers get one, the Colts get one, the Ravens get one, but instead it's Chiefs, 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 Chiefs. And so you get a little bit of fatigue there, right? You get fatigue from seeing it happen. Like, a lot of people, on Threads, I had a comment after a Chiefs game. It was the game before this one. So when they squeaked out a victory against Denver by blocking a field goal at the last second. And immediately, everybody went to blaming the referees. It's like, oh, it's fixed. Refs league wants the Chiefs to win. It's rigged, blah, blah, blah. And, I said something like, people who always blame refs for the outcome of a game are exhausting. And I got a bunch of comments who were like, oh, how can you defend this? It's so obvious that they're cheating. It's so obvious that it's rigged for them, blah, blah, blah. And those are the type of comments when you are just disgusted with the idea of a team winning, right? You are so mad that they continue to win that you have to make it seem like it was out of anybody's control, and that it becomes easier to accept the fact that this is rigged or whatever, right? And so that is where that hatred kind of comes from. Is that you're tired of seeing a team win. You're tired of seeing the same last-minute drive by Patrick Mahomes, the same game-winning kick by Harrison Butker, the same ceiling runs by Isaiah Pacheco, whatever. You're just so tired of seeing it, you want someone else to win. Somebody who watches the league, I kind of get that, right? It would be nice to see Justin Herbert get one. It would be nice to see Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson get one, as opposed to always being the Chiefs, right? But at the same token, even with that hatred, and I think maybe because of that hatred, we are equally fascinated by dynasties. People still have conversations and are writing books and making movies and talking about the 90s Bulls, the 2000s Lakers, the Patriots just had a documentary made about them, right? It's very seldom that a team that just has one great year or one championship is celebrated in that regards. Like the 84 Mets come to mind, the 85 Bears come to mind. But, no one's really making a movie about the 2020 Lakers. It's just because I think we kind of appreciate what goes into the difficulty of maintaining a dynasty. Use the Warriors as an example. If they had just won one title, we would have been like, oh, that's a cool story. Point guard who shoots a lot of threes, who got one, awesome. But because they strung so many titles together and so many finals appearances together, you end up saying, man, how do they keep this together? How does Steve Kerr manage these egos? How do Draymond Green and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson coexist? And then when it breaks up, that's another storyline factor, right? Whereas, like, if a team that won, like when the Eagles won that title with Nick Foles, that team was broken up within a couple years. No one really cared, right? Like, it's just like, yeah, well, they had a nice run. They beat the Patriots, and you got an all-time game from Nick Foles, and that's that, right? Whereas with dynasties, we love to tell the story, right? So think about what the Chiefs' story is. Patrick Mahomes, a guy who didn't really win a lot in college at Texas Tech, drafted in the top 10, but ultimately wasn't really considered to be like this needle-moving prospect. Obviously, the Chiefs saw it and went ahead and got him. And his rise from that into one of the most gifted quarterbacks we've ever seen, and his development into that is fascinating, right? You could write a book on that alone. Then you could, sticking with Mahomes, you could kind of look towards his wife, and she's an interesting story because, she's a former athlete herself. Obviously, there's been a lot of like friction about, if Patrick kind of felt like she and her and his brother kind of embarrassed him at certain times. Like that was a storyline for a while. Obviously, she's transitioned now into owning pieces of professional teams in collaboration with her husband as well. So that's a storyline. You look at Harrison Butker. He was in the news this summer for comments he made at a commencement ceremony at a university. It's controversial. It creates a good story. I wrote an article about that. It was captivating, right? It was something that people wanted to report on. You look at Travis Kelce. The brotherly bond with him and Jason and, being able to play each other in the Super Bowl before Jason retired. That's a good story. His relationship with Taylor Swift, how that all happened. Good story. His elevation into the podcast space as well is a good story. Oh, yeah, and by the way, he's one of the best tight ends to ever play the game. And then being in Kansas City, the comparisons to Tony Gonzalez are just going to be there, right? And then you go to Andy Reid. Is he better than Belichick? Is he the best offensive coach since Bill Walsh? These are conversation pieces that you only get when a team has sustained levels of elite success. You look at the way we talk about Jordan. That doesn't exist if he didn't win all those titles. Like if he only beat the Blazers one time and never won another one, no one would be talking about it like that. It'd be a footnote, and you think about like Montana winning 4 Super Bowls. If they only win one and make another one and lose, no one's really talking about it like that, right? We like to talk about the bigger rise and additionally the bigger fall, and that's something you only get with dynasties. So in a weird way, we hate them, but we love them, so we love to hate them, and it's just such a strong emotional response. And I think that's what you're seeing with the Chiefs, is that people have so many strong opinions about whether another team should be winning, whether, Patrick Mahomes is as great as people say he is. Like, that's another thing. People think that, Patrick Mahomes is overrated. The term system QB comes out, which, to me is laughable. And then people who hate Travis Kelce because of the Taylor Swift stuff. People who don't like Andy Reid for whatever reason. It's just Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator. A lot of people don't like him, and it's just kind of it's something that generates content, and it's something that people love to talk about because hatred is a much stronger emotion than admiration. One of the things that I always think about is when I was in college and we had a marketing class and we were talking about the power of a negative emotion. And the best example you could hear on that is this. You go to a restaurant. It's an amazing experience. You had just the best food ever. How many people are you really telling? Maybe tell like your partner, maybe you tell like a couple close friends. Now compare that to you have a terrible restaurant experience, like it was just disgusting, bad service, whatever. You're writing a Yelp review, you're telling everybody you know who lives in the general vicinity of that restaurant not to go there because, hey, I'm just trying to look out for you. Because anger is a stronger emotion. Hatred is a stronger emotion. And that's just kind of, I think, what has colored this, right? Where we hate the Chiefs because they keep on winning. So we're going to root and root and root until they lose, right? And let's say Lamar Jackson wins the Super Bowl this year, hypothetically. And then starts winning a couple more. After a couple, we'll be tired of Lamar Jackson too. That's just kind of, it's not like I feel like sometimes Chief fans think that it's like a vendetta against them, when it really isn't. It's really just a vendetta against consistent winning because we want something different all the time. But at the same time, when we're telling the stories, we kind of talk about the teams that were great, and the teams that are great win a lot. So it's kind of a weird juxtaposition. All right, just kind of closing out here to look at the Chiefs moving forward. It's so weird to me how this team has continued to win so many games. They have a good defense. The offense really isn't dynamic at all. They have a good running game. But they just find ways to win. And when you're a great team who's done it before, that's what you do. So when you kind of look around the AFC, so in the AFC East, you have the Bills, of course, which seems like the biggest threat to the Chiefs right now, especially since they just beat them. In their own division, you got Denver, and you got the Chargers. Chargers look good. You gotta wonder, with the decreased reliance on Justin Herbert, how well is that going to translate in the playoffs when they need some throws? Denver, it's a nice story, but they're not really a threat. You're looking at the AFC South Texans. They've looked incredibly shaky. A lot of injuries. Stephon Diggs out for the year. Nico Collins had an injury. Tank Dell's been injured at times. So they're kind of, I think, a few years away still. And then when you look at AFC North, you have the Steelers and the Ravens. And the Ravens feel like a team that's just not quite figuring their stride right now. And whereas the Steelers keep on winning games, but I don't think anyone's super confident in them moving forward, right? Like Russell Wilson has been good. Defense has been excellent. And they're winning a lot of games. But it does feel like a team that has a ceiling. You look at the NFC, which is an even weaker situation. Philly seems like a mess, even though they keep on winning games. Whoever happens to win the NFC South, they're not really doing anything. Do you have any faith in Atlanta right now? Tampa? Yeah, exactly. No one does. You look at the NFC West, they're kind of jumbled. Arizona, San Francisco, Seattle, LA. One of those teams is going to come out of that division. Don't think that strikes the fear of God in anybody. And then, of course, you got the NFC North with the Packers, the Vikings, and the Lions. Lions feel like the best team in football right now. And their offense is just next level. Their defense has been a lot better. I think that Buffalo and Detroit are the two teams that Kansas City has to worry about the most. Detroit could score a lot of points. So if they're scoring points on that defense, the same thing for Buffalo as well. They could also score a lot of points. Then that's a problem because the Chiefs' offense has proved to be kind of bad this year. Like they can't score a lot of points. They just have trouble moving the ball. They have trouble scoring in the red area. And it's just they sneak ways to win the game, but I think those two are the teams that you got to be worried about if you're a Chiefs fan. That being said, I think at worst they're in the AFC Conference Championship game again, right? It's hard to bet against Patrick Mahomes, And when it's kind of like Brady when he was in his prime. You just expect him to win games. You expect him to figure out a way. And none of these other guys in the AFC or even the NFC have that level of credit in people's mind where you think that regardless of whatever happens, doesn't matter how bad it gets, it just feels like they're going to figure it out. He's going to throw some seam route to Travis Kelce and somehow they're going to score and win the game, right? I think it's going to be interesting to watch moving forward. I still think people are going to hate on them religiously, really until they're an irrelevant franchise or they get knocked out early in the playoffs. Like if they were to get knocked out in the first or second round, depending on if they get the first overall seed bye or not, I think that people are just going to be rooting for their downfall and celebrating when they get it. And that's just the cost of being a dynasty in today's day and age and today's sports landscape. People are on social media, things change rapidly. So when you are the thing that is constant and not changing, then people are going to come for you, right? So it's going to be an interesting AFC playoff race here over these next 6 weeks. I'm excited for it. I hope you are too. And of course, we'll be kind of talking about it more as the playoffs inch near here in the NFL. That's going to wrap up another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Make sure to check out all your favorite clips from this pod on my TikTok at Ozaron319. And also, you can keep up with me on social media, Blue Sky and Threads. So until next time, I'm your host, Omar Zaran. Thank you for tuning in for another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast.